Welcome back to our news bulletin. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani says the delegation for dialogues with the Taliban will be formed by 10th March. Addressing National Assembly session in Kabul, Ghani says the negotiations team will defend the values of the country under the government's umbrella.
The Afghan president said there is a need for a transparent mechanism to release the Taliban prisoners. Ghani directed lawmakers to choose 2 members from the upper house and 5 from the lower house of the parliament. Ghani's remarks come after the Taliban said Kabul administration will be responsible if intra-Afghan talks are delayed beyond the set date. Group spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said Taliban are willing to negotiate if the prisoners are released as per the Doha Agreement with the US. Shaheen said the group's agenda is ready and its negotiation team will go ahead as agreed in the deal. Earlier, US President Donald Trump said the Taliban could possibly seize power after the United States withdraws from Afghanistan. Speaking at the White House, Trump said the US cannot stay in Afghanistan for the next 20 years. The president said the Afghan government will eventually have to protect the country itself.
In India, police have attacked the Anti-Citizenship Act protesting site and beaten the people at Mumbai Bar. 83 people have been killed in countrywide demonstrations against the controversial law in the last 3 months. Protesters said the police used force against them late at night after they had fallen asleep. They said the reason behind police brutality is a sheet which they had put up for shade. Meanwhile, former Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said the current situation in India after the CAA is very grim and morose. In an op-ed, Singh said the state institutions have abandoned their duty to protect citizens. Indian forces have arrested 750 civilians in occupied Kashmir under controversial Public Safety Act since August 5th. Under the Act, the forces can detain any individual for up to 2 years without a trial. The Kashmiri media said forces arrested 3 young men under the Act yesterday and sent them to jails in Jammu and Islamabad districts. It said the arrested include prominent lawyers, pro-freedom politicians, rights activists, students and civilians. Indian forces have arrested over 13,000 civilians, including minors, in the last 6 months. The valley has been reeling under Indian curfew and communications blackout for the last 216 days. The US has blocked the adoption of a UN Security Council statement supporting a Syrian ceasefire brokered by Russia and Turkey. Diplomats said Washington called the Russian proposal premature during the Council's closed-door meeting. Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, said various countries took note and welcomed the agreement, but he said due to a position from one delegation, it was not possible. Meanwhile, Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar says there have been no violations of the ceasefire agreed with Russia in Syria's Idlib. As the truce came into effect on Friday, Syria's war-ravaged Idlib province has witnessed relative calm for the first day in months. Turkey says the European Union is using migrants as a political tool and allowing international law to be trampled. In a statement, Turkish Foreign Ministry said the EU's support for Greece over migrants' crisis shows its disregard to its own laws and values. Despite the clashes with Greek police, tens of thousands of migrants have been trying to get into Greece since Turkey opened its border. After the development, Athens declared the end of the deal between the EU and Turkey to limit migration to Europe. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis accused Ankara of assisting the ongoing surge of migrants at the border. After several days waiting, migrants have started losing hope to reach Europe.
My eyes and my nose are hurting, and they're killing us. There was no food, nothing there. I've stayed 3 nights now. I have to go back. Now I am trying to take ticket if I can go now, otherwise I will go back tomorrow morning by bus. Normally I am living in Kankuri. Now I am going back to Istanbul and we'll see how it happens.
Meanwhile, Turkish Coast Guards have rescued 130 migrants and refugees in the Aegean Sea. Majority of the stranded people are Syrians and Afghans. The rescued migrants were aboard the 3 rubber dinghies. This happened when the Greek Coast Guard teams pushed back the boats to Turkey. The migrants were trying to reach the Greek island of Lesbos. So far, more than 1,700 people have disembarked on the Greek islands in the Aegean Sea. In Italy, 49 more people have died from the new coronavirus in the last 24 hours, bringing the death toll to nearly 200. Meanwhile, 28 new deaths from the outbreak were reported in China, taking the total to 3,070. The number of cases from the virus has topped 100,000 worldwide. More in this report.
Coronavirus scare continues to spread as new confirmed cases of the disease reported in regions outside China are increasing. In France, 200 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed, while India and South Korea also reported an increase in the number of infections. 21 people have tested positive for coronavirus on board the cruise ship stranded off the coast of the U.S. state of California. The World Health Organization says the virus has the capacity to spread and may last till summer.
We do not know yet what the activity or the behavior of this virus will be in different climatic conditions. We have to assume that the virus will continue to have the capacity to spread, and it's a false hope to say, yes, it will just disappear in the summertime like influenza virus. We hope it does. That would be a godsend, but we can't make that assumption.
Global stocks have tumbled and oil prices have collapsed as investors panic over the expected damage of the coronavirus to global economic growth. Wall Street stocks also suffered another bruising session, with petroleum producers and banks especially hard hit.
What we've clearly seen here is a number of weeks of selling. There's definitely panic within the financial community to a certain extent because stocks are trading at a discount of 20, 30, 40%. And we have to realize that 12 trading days ago, or 14, we were at a record high. So big trees fall hard, you know what I mean?
Millions of students are still out of schools and universities worldwide, as many countries have shut down academic institutions amid coronavirus fears.
The UN rights chief says governments using lockdowns to fight the deadly coronavirus must ensure that people's rights are respected. Speaking in Geneva, Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet said the response to the disease must place human dignity at the top. She said lockdowns, quarantines and similar measures should always be carried out in strict accordance with human rights standards. Bachelet said she understands the need for a range of steps to combat the virus. The epidemic has reached almost 90 countries, wreaking havoc on international business, tourism, sports events and schools. Saudi Arabia has opened the holy site of the Kaaba in Mecca for non-Umrah pilgrims. The kingdom put a rare freeze on pilgrimages to Mecca and Medina amid new coronavirus outbreak. King Salman bin Abdulaziz issued an order to open the mataf for visitors to circumambulate around Kaaba. Officials at Grand Mosque have asked pilgrims to adhere to the precautionary procedures and cooperate with authorities. Last week, Riyadh reported its first 2 cases of the new coronavirus. Moving on, Venezuela has accused the U.S. of devising plans to bring war and terrorism to the country. In a meeting in Caracas, President Nicolas Maduro said Washington is looking for ways to destabilize the country. Maduro said Brazil was Washington's agent in the region and President Jair Bolsonaro was backed by the U.S. He called upon Brazil's people and the armed forces to block any such adventures against Venezuela. The U.S. and over 50 other countries recognize opposition leader Juan Guaido as the country's legitimate president. Despite crushing U.S. sanctions, Maduro remains in power and is backed by Venezuela's military, as well as Russia, China, and Cuba. In Chad, 5 people have been killed in ethnic violence between nomadic herders and sedentary farmers. Officials say the attack took place near the Sudan border in the Sela region, where President Idris Deby lifted a state of emergency in January. Sela's governor said the villagers were returning from the market before they were brutally fired upon. He said the same scenario occurred 4 months ago at the same place. The governor said security forces have been deployed and an investigation has been launched to find the culprits. Tensions between indigenous farmers and nomadic Arab herders over the years have led into deadly clashes. The World Health Organization says it still needs $20 million to contain Ebola in Congo. The last patient being treated for the disease in Congo was discharged on Tuesday. WHO Assistant Director General for Emergency Response Ibrahim Asokefal says the end of the outbreak will be declared on 12th April. But he said it is critical to maintain surveillance and rapid response capacity in order to quickly diagnose any new cases. The global health body said it needs funds to maintain the team on the ground because Ebola is a matter of global health security. Ebola has killed over 2,000 people in Congo since the outbreak began in August 2018. In Algeria, protesters have vowed to press on with their movement against the country's ruling elite. Brushing off coronavirus concerns, thousands of demonstrators gathered in the streets of capital Algiers. The protesters said the government should give the power and sovereignty to the people. They asked the government to release all detainees and step down. Mass protests have been taking place in Algiers for over a year, with protesters demanding political change. In Belgium, Swedish activist Greta Thunberg took to the streets of Brussels to head a climate change rally. This comes the day after she slammed the European Parliament's 2050 deadline for climate targets. Over 3,000 protesters gathered outside the Brussels Central Station before heading towards the European Quarter. Thunberg called on the EU officials to stop leaving their mess for someone else to clean up for them. She censured leaders for continuing to ignore the demands of young people in favor of short-term benefits. The Swedish activist said these leaders will be held accountable for their actions. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our news bulletin. In the UK, a police officer has been arrested on suspicion of being a member of a banned right-wing group with links to terrorism. In a statement, police said the serving Metropolitan Constable is a 21-year-old arrested in North London. Police said the case has been referred to the Independent Office of Police Conduct and the officer's status is under review. The UK Home Office has been increasingly active in banning right-wing groups since last month. The UK says it will investigate the security of the country's 5G mobile network amid concerns about the role of Chinese company Huawei. The Parliamentary Defence Committee will lead the inquiry. The lawmakers said they will investigate the possibility of abuse before the technology is introduced into the British infrastructure. In a statement, Huawei said it will work with the committee to answer their questions. Prime Minister Boris Johnson handed Huawei a limited role in Britain's 5G mobile network in January despite US concerns. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has asked the world to make headway in improving women's rights toward generation equality. Countries around the world will observe International Women's Day tomorrow, demanding basic human rights for women, which they are still deprived of. Guterres said gender inequality is the overwhelming injustice of this age and the biggest human rights challenge the world faces. He said, men have used and abused power to control women and prevent them from achieving their potential for thousands of years. Guterres said, young women are creating new, inclusive forms of leadership that unite people across borders and ground common goals. The UN chief said, without women's leadership and full participation, the world will never achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Australians are enjoying the annual Balloon Spectacular event in the capital city of Canberra. Hundreds of people witnessed around 30 hot air balloons taking the shape on the lawn of Old Parliament House. This year, almost 40 meters high Tyrannosaurus Rex balloon was the star of attraction. At dawn, the balloons will be launched daily from the forecourt of the house and will float over Canberra. The Balloon Spectacular will run every day until March 15th. The event is complete with on-site entertainment, fun activities and food. The International Trade Committee of EU Parliament has extended generalized system of preferences plus status for Pakistan. The extension has enabled the country to continue enjoying preferential duties on exports for the next 2 years. The development is recognition of Islamabad's progress in enacting new laws and developing new institutions for implementation of 27 core conventions of GSP+. The committee said the major reason for this extension is the implementation of National Action Plan for Human Rights. Last month, the INTA and GSP Working Party of the European Council discussed the report on Pakistan's third biennial assessment. Pakistan's Commerce Ministry has thanked the EU for providing the unilateral trade concession. The group of top 20 economies of the world has pledged to take measures to protect fiscal growth against shocks in response to the COVID-19. In a joint statement, the group said it will take appropriate measures to maintain the resilience of the financial system. G20 chair Saudi Arabia welcomed the plans put forward by the finance ministers and central bank governors of member countries. In February's meeting in Riyadh, the G20 ministers agreed to monitor the virus and address the associated risks. Since then, the pandemic has sent world financial markets reeling and prompted a 0.5% rate cut by the US Federal Reserve. Earlier on Tuesday, G7 finance leaders made a similar pledge to maintain strong, sustainable growth amidst the pandemic. Russia says it has failed to reach an agreement on possible cuts in output at a meeting with OPEC. Oil prices plunged 10% as the development revived fears of a 2014 price crash. OPEC Secretary General said consultations on the issue will continue. On Thursday, OPEC ministers recommended a cut of 1.5 million barrels per day amid global slowdown due to the coronavirus. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.